I'm Chirag Bakai. I'm a GP in Luton and a national clinical advisor for diabetes at NHS England. And it's a great pleasure to be speaking to you today on the prevention of type 2 diabetes and the ambition for remission. And we'll be going into the detail of two of our flagship NHS programs, the Diabetes Prevention Programme and the Type 2 Diabetes Path to Remission Programme. Hopefully I can control the slides. Yes. So we'll be covering quite a lot of content in the time that we've got. We'll be going through the concept of non-diabetic hypoglycemia, how it's defined, why it's important. We'll be looking at the Diabetes Prevention Programme, what it does. We'll be going through some of the insights from Diabetes UK about making referrals. We'll be looking at the evidence for the programme's effectiveness and some of the recent changes to the programme. And then we'll be shifting to look at type 2 diabetes and the concept of remission, the story and the journey of the type 2 diabetes path to remission programme, the data thus far. So we'll be looking at referrals, uptake, retention, weight loss, and some early data on remission rates. And then we'll be looking at the practicalities of making a referral to that programme, including a bit of a particular focus on the medication adjustments. Setting some context, which I'm sure you'll know already, is that we have 3.5 million people, over 3.5 million people in England who are known to have type 2 diabetes, and that's from the National Diabetes Audit. And there are thought to be hundreds of thousands more who have type 2 diabetes who haven't yet been diagnosed. The number that we know about has doubled in the last 15 years, and that's largely related to changing lifestyles and people tending to carry more excess body weight. And it's thought that, according to the current trends, by 2030, 1 in 10 adults will have type 2 diabetes. It's currently a leading cause of blindness, kidney disease, and amputations, and a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And it's estimated that someone in their 50s who's diagnosed with type 2 diabetes loses around 6 years of life. And that number of years of life lost is thought to be greater with earlier ages of diagnosis. And really concerningly, we're seeing the greatest relative growth in prevalence of type 2 diabetes in those younger ages. So people under the age of 40, we're seeing that growing at a faster relative rate than older ages, which you may be aware has fed into some of the focus that we've had at NHS England on an early onset type 2 diabetes and the T Today programme. So we're going to start off with a case study, and you will have in a moment a poll coming up. So if you're willing to, it would be great if you could kind of put your answer in when that comes up. So we've got Amit is a 52-year-old male. He's got South Asian ethnicity. He's a taxi driver, not known to have any medical conditions, but has a family history of type 2 diabetes. He doesn't take any regular medicines. His blood pressure is 132 over 83, so that's fine. His BMI, some people might think that looks fine because it says 24, but actually in someone who's got South Asian ethnicity, that would be classed as overweight. And he comes asking to be checked for diabetes, which is not an unusual situation. And his HbA1c comes back at 42 millimoles per mole. So here, hopefully, you should have a poll coming up on screen. Just want to select the one that you think is right. So what would you do in this situation? As a reminder, we've checked HbA1c in Amit, and we've got a result of 42 millimoles per mole. Do we not do anything because we think those results are normal? Do we repeat the bloods with another HbA1c? Do we repeat the bloods with a fasting plasma glucose? Do we diagnose non-diabetic hypoglycemia at this moment without an immediate need to repeat bloods? Or do we diagnose type 2 diabetes without an immediate need to repeat bloods? So put your answers in now, and then I'm going to very shortly move on to the reveal. Okay, so hopefully, I got screen control again. Hopefully you will have, yes, okay, I think I've got screen control.
You do?
For D, okay, diagnose NDH without the need to repeat bloods. Excellent. So non-diabetic hypoglycemia is defined as an HbA1c of 42 to 47 millimoles per mole, or a fasting plasma glucose of 5.5 to 6.9 millimoles per litre. It's sometimes called pre-diabetes. And unlike asymptomatic type 2 diabetes, you don't need to repeat the test. So this is a question that comes up a lot. Do you need to repeat it right after you've had that result? No, you don't. One result is enough to make the diagnosis. And according to the last National Diabetes Audit report from March 2023, we've got 3.2 million people who are coded in GP records with non-diabetic hypoglycemia. It's a high-risk state for developing type 2 diabetes. So NICE recommend the annual monitoring of glycemia and weight. And in 2020, QOF introduced an incentive for the glycemic monitoring in people with NDH. And that's really important because you're looking for progression to type 2 diabetes. And if you do find someone has progressed, an early diagnosis is associated with much better outcomes than a delayed diagnosis, of course. One point to note is different tests, so HbA1c and fasting plasma glucose, can identify different people, particularly at the threshold of diagnosis. So you could have someone who has NDH according to their fasting plasma glucose, but actually if you checked HbA1c, it would look okay. And you're better off just sticking with one test for that person. So the recommendation would be, if you find NDH on one particular type of test, that's your test you should use to monitor them thereafter. And they should have annual glycemic monitoring according to NICE, and that's what's incentivized by QOF. Risk factors for having NDH are pretty much the same as for having type 2 diabetes. The major modifiable risk factors carrying excess body weight, so living with obesity, and then sedentary behavior, smoking, being older, being male, having a family history of type 2 diabetes, and particularly South Asian ethnicity and Black ethnicity are higher risk than white ethnicity for both type 2 diabetes and NDH. There are also a number of other conditions which are associated, which you can see on screen: hypertension, CVD, polycystic ovarian syndrome, a history of gestational diabetes, SMI, and learning disabilities. So NICE say in the PH 38 guidance, which came out many years ago in 2012 and was updated in 2017, that the approach for checking for type 2 diabetes, some of the risk factors, should be you use a validated risk score. So that might be what you can see in the middle of the screen, the Know Your Risk tool from DUK, which is a rebranded Leicester risk score. It might be Q Diabetes if you've got that on your system. It doesn't really matter, but they suggest you use a risk score. And for anyone who gets a high score from doing that, you offer them a blood test. But and that's entirely reasonable. There'll be many people you will come across though that have risk factors that you can identify, and those risk calculators of risk tools don't take into account those risk factors. So if you think someone is at high risk of diabetes, it's entirely reasonable just to check them and offer them a blood test. And NICE in their guidance say that anyone aged 25 or over who's got South Asian or Chinese ethnicity with a BMI greater than 23 should be offered a blood test, or you should consider offering a blood test, as Amit in our case study. This is some data from the National Diabetes Audit dashboard for NDH, and you can find this. You don't need a login or anything. You can just find this online by searching for it. And I'm going to just show you this green line here. So hopefully you can see my mouse moving. And you can see from the first year of the audit in 2017-18, we had a recorded prevalence. So that's recorded from GP records of 2.8% for NDH. And in the most recent audit, it's 6.4%, which is a really dramatic increase. That isn't to say that the actual true prevalence has more than doubled in that fairly short period, but really this goes to show how much improvement there's been in recognition of the kind of concept of non-diabetic hypoglycemia, and that people are much better at identifying it and recording it and coding it than they once were. And I think that to a large degree, this is related to the diabetes prevention program, which first came out in 2016 and then had a nationwide rollout by 2018, and has really increased awareness of this concept of non-diabetic hypoglycemia. Some data from the NDA on the monitoring of people with NDH. So the box and whisker plot at the top is for glycemic monitoring, the one at the bottom is for BMI, and within each one, you've got 3 years of data. You've got 21-22 at the top, 20-21 in the middle, and 19-20 at the bottom. And for glycemic monitoring, you can see the blue box is shifted to the right compared to previous years, and the whiskers are narrower. So we see better performance generally in terms of glycemic monitoring and less variation by ICB. So that's all really positive. And I think that's probably because of a QOF incentive more than anything. And there is no QOF incentive for BMI, and we don't see the same picture on BMI. You don't see that improvement and that reduction in variation. So why is NDH important in the first place? Independently, NDH is associated with a greater risk of CKD and a greater risk of CVD, but the major thing is that the risk of progression to type 2 diabetes. And when I first started working with the national team, we didn't have good data about progression rates for NDH as we define it. But through the national diabetes audit modules that first came in 17, 18, we can now get an idea of what happens to people over time with NDH. So if we look at the cohort who was first identified with NDH in that 2017-18 year, by 21-22, 1 in 6 had developed type 2 diabetes. But there's more to the story in that the progression rates are different by characteristic. So we've got a 1 in 6 rate for the whole cohort with NDH, but it's a higher rate of progression in people of South Asian ethnicity, people of Black ethnicity, younger people with NDH, and people living with obesity, and people living in deprived areas. So those characteristics are associated with having a greater rate of progression from NDH to type 2 diabetes. So going back to our case study, we've diagnosed NDH, and we have a discussion about the results. We talk about what it means and the need for annual monitoring. We talk through his individual risk factors and give some lifestyle advice accordingly. And then, of course, what can be done to reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes? No surprise here, given the subject of this talk, we're going to talk about the diabetes prevention programme. And NICE says, offer them a referral to a local evidence-based, quality-assured, intensive lifestyle change programme, which is essentially the DPP. So the programme first launched, as I said, in 2016, and it was rolled out in waves until we had full national coverage in 2018. And it's got 3 key elements to it: supporting people to have a better, healthier diet and nutrition, increasing their physical activity, and reaching and maintaining a healthy weight. And it's all underpinned by behaviour change theory. So it's really designed to help people make lasting changes to their lifestyle. And that's partly why it lasts a long duration of 9 months as a minimum. People have a choice of group-based face-to-face delivery, or they can have one-to-one digital. Digital is still with a human coach, but it's over an app or the web. It's funded nationally, so ICBs don't pay anything. Participants, of course, don't pay anything either. And referrals are almost completely from general practice, although they don't have to be. So hospital services, for example, could send referrals to the programme as long as the general practice details are filled in on the form. A referral for this service does qualify for the weight management enhanced service if the patient is eligible and meets the requirements. And so far, there have been over 1.5 million referrals to the programme, and over 700,000 people have actually started. The eligibility are having non-diabetic hypoglycemia with an NDH range blood test in the previous 12 months, or having a history of gestational diabetes. And we'll go on to the GDM element a bit more later. And the other requirements are being an adult, not having been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, not having an eating disorder, or moderate or severe frailty, or bariatric surgery in the previous 2 years. So some of the insights that have come from Diabetes UK, who've done a lot of work in this space, of what makes a referral more effective, what makes someone more likely to go on the programme after they've been referred. And one of the key elements is having had a discussion with a healthcare professional who's explained the programme to them seems to make a real difference. If that's not always feasible, of course, but if an administrator is contacting someone to offer them a referral, just name dropping a trusted healthcare professional can be quite effective. And the things that to inform someone of are all the things you would probably want to know if you were being offered a referral to a programme. So why? What did it actually do? Does it work? What's the evidence for it? What is it expected to help me with? And what to expect from the actual delivery. So how is it delivered? It's important to tell people they'll have a choice of face-to-face or digital delivery, how long it lasts for, and the location of local sessions is quite helpful, and where they can find more information. The referral forms are in your clinical systems. They probably take like 10 seconds or so to actually fill out. They're really quick. Almost everything on there, or everything, will auto-populate. And there are 3 different ways in which you might identify people to refer. The first is opportunistically, like in our case study with Amit. You know, we've done some blood tests for whatever reason. We found that he's got non-diabetic hypoglycemia, and we can offer a referral at that time. Or you could do systematic searches of your clinical system. If you're doing that, you're better off doing it on people who've got NDH range results, because there's still, even though it's improved a lot over recent years, there's still quite a decent proportion of people who've got NDH results that haven't been coded as having NDH. So it's a really good opportunity to find people with those results and action them accordingly. So if they haven't been coded and the person hasn't been informed, letting them know, code it, and then offering a referral if appropriate. And then the third means is through kind of systematic checks like NHS health checks or postnatal checks. So this is a referral data since launch, and we had kind of nationwide coverage around here. No prizes for guessing what happened in March 2020, but referral flow has more than recovered since then, and is pretty much at the highest level that it's been since the programme was available. Having said that, we do see quite marked variability by ICB. So each of the ICBs in England is represented here, and each will have a dark blue line and a light blue line. The dark blue line is the rate of referrals relative to the size of the NDH population, and the light blue is the rate of people starting the programme relative to the NDH population. And you can see they vary quite markedly in size from system to system. You'll get these slides later, so do have a look at where your system is on here. And referrals over time have changed somewhat in their characteristics. By sex, not really much of a difference. By age, we see a greater proportion of referrals being of younger people as time has gone on. So going left to right, we're getting from like older to more recent. And you're seeing kind of as we go from left to right, the proportions increasing in the younger ages and going down in the older ages, which might reflect decisions about clinical suitability for such an intervention. By deprivation, I guess the most obvious bit is for least deprived. We're seeing a lowering proportion generally of those from the least deprived population being referred over time. And by ethnicity, I don't think there's anything particularly notable in terms of changing. And do the referrals actually match our idea of the eligible population? So through the National Diabetes Audit, we have an idea of who the eligible population is. We see men slightly underrepresented. So the light blue line is bars are for the DPP referrals. The dark blue are the eligible population from the NDA. And we see that men are slightly underrepresented compared to women, but that I think is pretty favourable compared to what you see in commercial weight management programmes. And by age, we see a left shift. So that light blue line is shifted to the left of a dark blue line, showing that, again, greater proportions from younger age groups tend to get referred. By deprivation, it's pretty even, so that's good. And by ethnicity, we see people of Asian ethnicity are more likely to be referred relative to the size of their population in the eligible population, and the same is true for Black ethnicity. And I suspect that probably reflects an awareness of the greater risk of type 2 in people of Asian and Black ethnicities and the risk of progression. So does the programme actually work? Here is some data on weight loss, and this is data that we've had from I think from July 2022 onwards, when we had resumption of face-to-face alongside digital delivery. And this is the data from completers. So that's people who have attended at least 60% of sessions on the DPP. And we see a weight loss, a mean weight loss of 3.2 kilograms for the face-to-face arm and 3.9 kilograms of weight loss for digital. Bear in mind that the baseline starting weight on digital is greater, so that accounts for some of the difference we see. And on the intention to treat, which includes anybody, even if they dropped out very early on, you've got a weight loss of 1.9 kilograms on face-to-face and 2.3 kilograms on digital. So that's the weight data. We've got some data from the National Diabetes Audit on the hazard ratios for developing type 2 diabetes. And here we've looked at consecutive years, and we've had people followed up for around a 2-year period, and we've looked at the association between different levels of contact with a prevention program and the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So your reference level is not referred, and you see they're all ones. And generally, you can see that they vary a bit year to year, but let's say they're about 0.6 roughly. So we see a 40% reduction in risk of developing type 2 diabetes associated with having completed the program compared to not being referred. Although it's worth mentioning that this is an association, we can't say causation from this analysis. There's also a clear dose-response relationship, which means the more sessions people attend, there tends to be a greater benefit. So this is some very early analysis that we published some years ago on weight change with number of sessions attended. And you can see there's a generally fairly linear relationship with the more sessions attended, the more weight loss. But this is also quite interesting, this thing on the right, which shows each bar, each color represents a certain level of weight loss or weight gain, as some of them are. But you can see that then, regardless of the level of weight loss, you see a pattern of the more sessions attended, a lower rate of developing type 2 diabetes, which to me suggests that it's not just about the weight loss. There is something else going on about the things people are learning and how they're changing their lifestyles that has an impact in reducing the rate of type 2 diabetes. We've also had independent evaluation of the programme. These two studies on the left were done from Manchester University. The first, they looked at the rollout of the programme in waves, and they saw where you had the programme compared to where you didn't, you could see an impact on incidence of type 2 diabetes from having the programme present. And the second one here was a matched cohort study looking at the impact of referral to the programme on the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And bear in mind that 50% of those referred, roughly half of them who are referred, don't actually start the programme. So referral to the programme in itself was associated with a 20% relative risk reduction for incidence of type 2 diabetes. And some other analysis that team did showed that completion of the programme was associated with a 37% relative risk reduction in developing type 2 diabetes. And there was another study done that was published late last year, which was really interesting design, looked at people with an HbA1c of 41 who wouldn't be eligible for a programme compared to those with an HbA1c of 42 who would be, and looked at a variety of metrics for them, and found that as well as the glycemic benefits, which you'd expect associated with the programme, there were also benefits seen to other kind of markers of cardiometabolic health, like lipid levels, for example. And that leads on to some of the analysis that we've been doing, looking at the benefits of the programme. So when I first started talking about the DPP in Luton some years ago, I was saying that it's branded as a diabetes prevention programme, but really we're getting people to live healthier lives, lose weight, improve their physical activity. I suspect there'll be a number of other benefits other than diabetes prevention. And we're investigating that in this space and the impact on multimorbidity. So as well as the impact we can see in terms of diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, which is this top element here, here we've got newly diagnosed associated conditions. So that's things like hypertension. And you can see a changing time frame here. But for completers of the programme, we see a clear association with a lower odds of developing some of those other conditions. And this lowest element looks at not classically associated conditions. So those things are asthma. And even there, we can see an association with completion and lower rates of developing these other conditions. Again, though, this analysis is association rather than causation. And to mention one of the major changes that have happened recently for the DPP, we've had, since the programme launched, women with GDM could be referred to the programme on the basis of having non-diabetic hypoglycemia. Then in 2021, we changed that and said if someone has got normoglycemia and a blood test that demonstrates normoglycemia, they can still be referred to the programme. They don't need to have non-diabetic hypoglycemia. And this group is really important because they're at really high risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And it's estimated that someone who's had GDM has a 50% risk of developing type 2 diabetes within 5 to 10 years. But this is what we saw in the data. right? So if people were being referred on the basis of GDM alone, you would expect to see a bell-shaped curve, right? But we don't. My interpretation of what we see here, and this is the H1C data from February 21 to March 23 for women with a background of GDM, you see really a dominant picture of people being referred on the basis of having NDH, because that starts at 42. And then you see a much lower level of activity for those with normoglycemia. So what we've tried to do is try and remove some of the barriers for accessing the programme and remove the requirement for a blood test for those with previous GDM and allow them to self-refer. So now across the country, in every single system, women with GDM can self-refer to the DPP. They can self-refer even while they've got GDM in pregnancy, although they can't start the programme until after pregnancy. So you should have your own leaflets in each system. Hopefully you're engaged with your maternity services so they know about this and are kind of giving this information to women as they're discussing GDM and the diagnosis of them. But I think this is hopefully a real big step forward to increasing access for a high-risk group. Now, shifting subjects somewhat, we've got another case study. Hopefully our poll might work a bit better this time. So we'll have a poll again in a moment. So Hayley's a 42-year-old woman. She's got white ethnicity and she's a teacher, background of hypertension, dyslipidemia and migraine. And she's on amlodipine 5 milligrams, candesartan 16 milligrams, and atorvastatin 20 milligrams daily. All of this becomes more relevant later. She's got a BMI of 32 and a blood pressure of 128/77. She comes with fatigue, no other symptoms. You get a set of bloods done, and the bloods show an H1C of 50 millimoles per mole. So again, what do we do? Let's see if the poll comes up. It does. Okay, great. So same options as last time. Do you do nothing because those results are normal? Do you repeat the bloods with another H1C? Do you repeat with a fasting glucose? Do you diagnose NDH without needing to repeat bloods? Or do you diagnose type 2 diabetes without needing to repeat bloods in the short term? And I'm just going to give a few seconds for people to pick what they would do. I'm now going to go on to the answer. Hopefully you've picked. And yes, hopefully you picked repeat bloods with another H1C. And the reason here is because she's asymptomatic. So with type 2 diabetes, someone asymptomatic, nice guidance is you should repeat the blood test for confirmation. And I get a lot of questions about this. And some people have the idea of, oh, you need to wait a certain amount of time before you repeat. You absolutely don't. Actually, the ideal would be to repeat as soon as possible. The longer you wait before you do a repeat, the greater the intervening time, of course, for someone to make changes to their life or things to happen in the intervening period, which makes interpretation of a second result really tricky. So ideally, you want to repeat that result as soon as you can, within a couple of weeks, certainly. And moving on to talking about type 2 diabetes, hopefully. So there's been a major shift in our thinking of type 2 diabetes over recent years, where it used to be regarded as a permanent progressive condition. A lot of the work done, really led by Roy Taylor and his team in Newcastle, has shifted some of our thinking on that. And I'm going to attempt to explain some of the kind of thinking of pathogenesis here, although Roy does it much better than I do. Is that people have a personal fat threshold. Those are Roy's words, his terminology, that above their personal fat threshold, they develop type 2 diabetes because you get fat deposited in the liver and fat deposited in the pancreas. And each person's threshold is different depending on genetics and other factors. But fat deposited in the liver means you get aberrant gluconeogenesis. And by that, the liver is used to making sugar. When you're sleeping, the liver needs to make sugar because otherwise your blood sugars would just drop down entirely. So your liver's used to making sugar, but when it starts misbehaving and producing too much sugar, leading to a higher fasting glucose. And then fat in the pancreas results in the response to sugar rises after meals being blunted and less insulin being released in response to meals. And therefore you get, or rises in blood sugar, and therefore you get kind of the postprandial raised glucose levels, and gives you that overall picture of type 2 diabetes. And that there is a window in which, if you get the fat out of the liver and the fat out of the pancreas, you can get normal functioning of those organs returning. And that's the concept of remission of type 2 diabetes. So attaining and maintaining normal glycemic levels without needing medicines. And there was a consensus report in 2021 which suggested a definition, although we with NICE don't yet have a formalized definition. The consensus report said remission should be defined as a return of HbA1c to less than 6.5% or 48 millimoles per mole that occurs spontaneously or following an intervention, and that persists for at least 3 months in the absence of usual glucose-lowering pharmacotherapy. So they've said 3 months in that consensus statement. On the program, on the remission program, we've talked about 6 months generally, and that's partly for practical reasons of when we would expect reviews to take place on the program. If you identify remission, don't use the code diabetes resolved. There is a code on the system for type 2 diabetes in remission. The problem with diabetes resolved, it's a weird code and it shouldn't really be used much at all, only if you made a mistake about a diagnosis. And if you use that code, it removes someone from QOF, it removes them from recall, and it's bad news. So use the remission code instead, please. And something just to be aware of. So we did some work a few years ago looking at care process delivery in people who had evidence remission, whether or not they'd been coded as having remission. And we found that people who were coded as having remission had lower rates of care process completion to those who had evidence of remission but hadn't been coded. And that's concerning because, of course, people who attain remission may well gain weight over time. Most people do gain weight over time. And if you regain weight, then at some point, if you gain enough weight, you will kind of have glycemic levels in the diabetes range again, and that risk of complications. So we really want people to be getting their care processes irrespective of if they're in remission or not. So just to be aware that there seems to be an association with the recognition of remission and lower rates of care processes. And whenever we identify remission, we should be really careful to make sure we continue delivering the care processes for everyone as we would with type 2 diabetes. Now, moving on to the program itself and where it came about and some of the history. Direct was published in early 2018. And what Direct did, if you don't know, is it used a total diet replacement approach, which is kind of called by the media a soup and shake diet, for people with type 2 diabetes over about 3 months. And they found that at 1 year, 46% of people had achieved remission of type 2 diabetes. And one of the things to note about Direct is it used healthcare professionals delivering the intervention in general practice. So practice nurses, dietitians are who delivered the intervention. Then about 6 months later, Droplet was published. And this study was in a broader group of people, not necessarily those only with type 2 diabetes. It was people living with obesity, found very similar levels of weight loss using a similar approach of total diet replacement. So they had 10 to 15 kilograms of weight loss, as did Direct. But critically, what was different is they used commercial providers rather than NHS workforce, which really lends itself to scaling. And then in the long-term plan, which was published in early 2019, the NHS committed to piloting such an approach in people with type 2 diabetes living with overweight and obesity, and later that year invited CCGs to express an interest. We had our first wave of pilot sites launch in 2020, delayed a little bit because of the pandemic, and then a second wave of pilot sites launched in early 2022. Based on feedback from them, the early data, and insights from the evaluators at Leeds Beckett University, we made a national specification. And that's been now rolled out across the whole country. So every system in England has access to this programme from April 2024. The aims of it are to lead to really clinically significant weight loss. So we're thinking of 10 kilograms or greater, and to maintain that weight loss. And by doing so, improve glycemic parameters such as HbA1c and potentially achieve remission of type 2 diabetes. And we want to increase the evidence for clinical and cost effectiveness in the real world. So just looking at what does the program actually, what does it entail? And we're looking to the right of this green bar. So people, once they start the program, start the total diet replacement phase. They have 12 weeks of it where they have quite tightly regulated nutritional supplements or foods. There's soup and shakes, but there's more than just soups and shakes. So they get all the kind of nutrients that are essential, but it's limited to 800 to 900 calories in a day. So energy, an energy deficit. And then after those 12 weeks, they have 6 weeks of food reintroduction, which helps them adopt a healthy diet. And then for the rest of the 1 year program, they get support to maintain that weight loss and make lifestyle changes and new behaviors. If they regain more than 2 kilograms of weight, they're offered a further 4 weeks of total diet replacement. Every ICB has selected their provider through a competitive process. All referrals for this program are through general practice, and as with the DPP, they can qualify for the weight management enhanced service. There's a number of eligibility criteria. Most are taken from direct. Some have been adapted for pragmatism. So some of those eligibility criteria are 18 to 65 for age, a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes within the previous 6 years, and a BMI of 27 or greater, but that's adjusted for ethnicity, so 25 or greater for minority ethnic groups. People have a choice between one-to-one face delivery or one-to-one digital delivery, but all of it's in one-to-one. There's no cost to participants, there's no cost to the ICB either, and there's no cost for the participants on the TDR products. Everything is free of charge. The provider will monitor blood pressure and blood glucose and will feed back to general practice if a tweak needs to happen. And they've got set criteria and thresholds where they would communicate, but the provider will do the lifting in terms of monitoring blood pressure and blood glucose. And we'll talk about more about that in a moment. The GP practice is asked to do reviews at 6 months and 12 months to check HbA1c. There's a number of eligibility criteria. I'm not going to go through them. They will be on your referral forms. So our referrals have, this is the kind of pattern over time. We had a second set of pilot sites going live here, and we had new sites coming on board around here, and we'll have new sites just coming on board very recently. Altogether, we've had about 23 or 24,000 referrals thus far. Around just under half of referrals are in people who've been diagnosed for less than a year. Just under half are in people under the age of 50. We see a greater proportion in women than in men, but it's not too dissimilar, and again compares favourably to commercial weight management programs. And then if we look at deprivation, we see a greater proportion of referrals from those in the most deprived quintiles than in the least deprived quintiles. And then if we compare that to the population we think are eligible from the National Diabetes Audit, so the light blue bars are what we actually see in terms of referrals at present, and the dark blue are what we expect the eligible population looks like according to the NDA, we see that we're almost where we need to be, but not quite there. And for Asian ethnicity, we see that they are, people of Asian ethnicity are somewhat underrepresented in referrals compared to the NDA population. So there are two things that people have said, I suppose, that come up often when we've been rolling out the program or operationalizing it, which is that, that it sounds all great in theory and in a randomized control trial, but if you offer it to people, they won't want to do it, they'll get referred and they won't actually start, or if they start, they'll just drop out because it must be too hard, right? Some of those are the preconceptions that people raise. So in terms of uptake, we see that nearly 2/3 of people who are referred actually do start total diet replacement, so the diet itself, and 9 out of 10 stick with it till the end of the diet. So that 3 months of total diet replacement, only 1 in 10 or so drop out. And I think some of this is because people have often really struggled to lose weight, and they go on this regime and this level of support, and it's quite intensive support, and they see the weight just dropping off them, and that's really motivating. And then thereafter, when they're in weight maintenance, it's a bit less exciting because they're not actively dropping off weight. It's more about maintaining weight loss. And then we see a higher drop-off rate happening. But by the end, at 12 months, we have just over half of people remaining on the program. And the weight change we see is after the total diet replacement phase has just finished, they've lost about 2 stone, so around 13 kilograms in weight. And then at 12 months, the mean weight loss is just over 10 kilograms at 10.1 kilograms. I find kilograms easier to visualize. If you like percentages baseline, I think that's 9.3% of baseline body weight. So then on to the remission data. The numbers here, we've got to say, are really small at present because we've had to look at participants who started total diet replacement before January 2022. So they would have had time to finish by December 2022 so that we can get the data from the National Diabetes Audit and link it to programme data. And only 42% of the people then included actually had H1C measurements at the relevant time points. But looking at those who've had 2 H1C measurements, and the latter one being 11 to 15 months after programme start, we found that of completers, so those who got to the 12-month point on the programme, 41% had both H1Cs under 48 millimoles per mole. 32% met the definition of remission because they were on no glucose-lowering medicines from 3 months prior to the first measurement, and 9% had both H1Cs under 48 millimoles per mole, but didn't meet the definition of remission because they stayed on glucose-lowering medicines, mostly metformin. And then you can see the intention to treat numbers are 35% for having both H1Cs under 48, and that would be split into 27% meeting the definition of remission and 8% not meeting the definition because they stayed on glucose-lowering medicines. I think the numbers are too small to see any clear significance by characteristic other than by duration of diagnosis. We see that those who are referred within a year of being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes are significantly more likely to achieve remission than those with longer durations of diabetes. And you can see that in this slide. This is for completers and this is for intention to treat. Similar pattern. And we've got significance between under 1 year and 4 to 6 years here. And we've got it between under 1 year and 1 to 3 years and 4 to 6 years here. And the magic number in terms of weight loss seems to be about 15 kilograms. So if you've got 15 kilograms or more of weight loss, you're more likely than not to achieve remission of type 2 diabetes at 1 year. Some insights then about how to discuss referral with someone. These have come from the Department of Primary Care Health Sciences at the University of Oxford. Don't make assumptions, ask, don't tell, and be inquisitive. And when you're talking about the programme, try and frame it positively. Don't assume that someone won't be interested or it won't be acceptable. And early in, when you're talking about it, make clear that it's free of charge. People don't necessarily expect that it will be free of charge or that they won't have to pay for these products. So if you kind of say it very early on, then it puts it to one side and people can then actually be more receptive and listening to the other elements about the programme. Tell them about some of the data that we've just talked about and share some of that. And if someone says no, then don't push it. You can always bring it up at a later date. People often change their mind, or actually there might be something else that's more suitable for them. And going into some of the practicalities and the detail of making a referral, you will have seen on those early slides, there are loads of eligibility criteria. It's complicated. And it's much better to make sure someone is eligible before referring them than finding out later, or actually they weren't. It's really disappointing to them, and it's not a good use of clinician time either. So try and make sure someone is eligible before you start having the conversation about referring them. There are IT related ways of doing that. So on my system, I've built this icon, which is on screen for someone if they are very likely to be eligible for the programme. And if that icon isn't there, I know they're almost certainly not eligible for the programme. Some other systems have used pop-ups. We've got all of these available for you to put in at practice level or to roll out at ICB level if you go onto our pages, the NHS England Diabetes Programme pages on Future NHS. And you can roll these out too. They are really helpful as double checking whether someone is eligible or not. Most of the form will auto-populate, but there is a section on medication adjustments which needs a little bit of thought. It's easy once you've done it a few times, but it's unfamiliar, of course, if you've not done it. And there's guidance in your referral form about how to do it. Responsibility for those medication changes sits with the referrer, but there are certain absolutes. So someone who is on a sulfonylurea or an SGLT2 inhibitor won't be able to start the programme unless the referrer said you need to stop those medicines on the first day of TDR, because those are not safe with a total diet replacement programme. So going very briefly into what does it look like in terms of medication changes. For blood glucose lowering medicines, the key question is how many medicines are they on? And if they're on 2 or less, then any medicines they're on, the suggestion would be just stop them. And if they're on 3 or more, then they can stay on one, or it's entirely reasonable to stay on one as long as it's safe with total diet replacement. And for blood pressure lowering medicines, the key question to ask is their blood pressure controlled? If the blood pressure is not controlled, then the advice would be don't make any changes to the blood pressure lowering medicines. And that's not just medicines that are used for hypertension, but medicines that also have an effect of blood pressure lowering. So it could be something for migraine prophylaxis like candesartan, could be tamsulosin or something for BPH. So medicines that have the effect of lowering blood pressure, or diuretics. If their blood pressure is controlled, then we would advise focusing on the medicines that are only being used for managing blood pressure. So you're not using it for BPH, or you're not using it for migraine prophylaxis, and stopping the medicines in that group that are used solely for blood pressure, that would have been added last, according to NICE guidance. And we've got an example of that coming up in a moment. For reassurance, because many of us feel we're not so used to deprescribing, but blood pressure and blood glucose both fall pretty quickly when you're on total diet replacement. So this is from Counterpoint. You can see blood glucose drops very quickly and quite markedly after starting total diet replacement. And you see a similar but less dramatic picture for blood pressure. And that's why we recommend the adjustments. So going back to our case study, we discuss the program with Hayley, and she accepts an offer of referral. We ask, would you like to start any glucose lowering medicines in the time you'll be waiting until we start the program? She turns that down. As a reminder, she's got hypertension, dyslipidemia, and a history of migraine, and she's on amlodipine, candesartan, and atorvastatin. Her BMI is 32 and her blood pressure is 128/77. So the final quiz, what medication changes would be suggested to take place on the first day of TDR? And I'll give you a minute just to give some thought to that.
While people are thinking of, there's a question about who's responsible for making the changes, the sort of service you're referring into the program, or the GP. I think that's a good.
So general practice is responsible for having the discussion with the person and agreeing what the changes are with the person you're referring. And those changes, to be really clear, should take place on the first day of total diet replacement. Okay, I'm gonna go through the options and the answers. So the options were don't make any changes, or stop amlodipine. The next one was stop or reduce candesartan. Then the next one was stop the statin and stop amlodipine. And then the final one was stop the statin and stop the candesartan. And the right answer is stop the amlodipine. And the reason for that is, I guess one important point to make is we really would not advise stopping statins. They have a number of benefits, and they are really important. So we would encourage people to stay on statins. And why amlodipine in this scenario rather than candesartan? Two reasons. According to NICE guidance, for people with type 2 diabetes, your antihypertensive of choice is an ACE inhibitor or an angiotensin receptor blocker. Candesartan is an ARB, so that would be kind of positioned first line here. And then calcium channel blocker is a second line, which is the amlodipine. So according to NICE, you would have added the amlodipine last. So that would be the one to remove. But also the other added factor here is she's using candesartan for migraine prophylaxis. So there's another reason not to stop it. So hopefully we've covered the intended outcomes for our session. We've gone through loads of content. And I'm just going to finish on a slide with some possible quality improvement initiatives that you could explore. I've alluded to, when we were talking about searches for people with NDH results, that not everyone is coded. So one thing that you could do quite easily is run reports for missing diagnoses, not just for people with NDH. We've got CVD Prevent has reported on people who have almost certainly got type 2 diabetes, or certainly do have type 2 diabetes because they've got 2 H1Cs consecutively above 48, but they don't have a diabetes code. And there are thousands of them across England. So that's a really important group. Running a report to look for people with a diabetes range H1C who don't have a code, and then doing something about it. So reviewing them, communicating with them, and managing them as we should, is a really useful quality improvement initiative. Something else you could do is identify people who've got NDH or GDM who haven't had a glycemic check in the last 12 months. Another thing you could do now that we've got the self-referral pathway is run a report to find anyone who's got previous GDM who hasn't yet developed type 2 diabetes and drop them a text inviting them to self-refer to the DPP. And then another thing you might want to do is improve processes for offering referrals, and that might be building stuff into your clinical system. So you can see on that screenshot below, I've got little icons and alerts that tell me, oh, this person hasn't had their glycemia checked, or they haven't been referred to the program, please consider referring them. And I've got them for the DPP, and I've got them for the Remission program as well. And that for the Remission program, it's so useful because it really helps with double checking the eligibility. So if your ICBs are rolling out the program right now, or if they've rolled it out some time ago, but you don't have those things on your system, do have a word with them. And in ICBs, if you go on our future NHS site, you can find all the resources just to input this in fairly easily. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
That was great. So we're going to go into a Q&A session. There have been lots and lots of questions. Thank you everyone for putting your questions in the Q&A. So I'm just going to go through a few. I'm aware of time. We may not be able to answer all of them, but we will try reach out to you to answer the questions because we have your contact details. But if your questions aren't contacted us because we might have missed something, please feel free to reach out to us. So there've been a few questions about sort of the NDH sort of label and pre-diabetes. Is it different? Can we talk to people about pre-diabetes, because sort of non-diabetes hypoglycemia sounds quite a big term?
There is, I mean, if we dig into the minutiae, there is a technical slight difference, but I think in reality it's fine, and use whatever term you're comfortable with. They are essentially used interchangeably these days.
And the coding, because there's different codings. Can you talk a bit more widely about sort of what is the right code to use, or what's the best code to use for this group of people?
I mean, so if I find someone meeting the thresholds of NDH, I code it as non-diabetic hypoglycemia. If you coded it as pre-diabetes, that's fine. QOF will recognise that. The NDA will recognise that. So it doesn't really matter. Use whichever coding comes to mind easier for you. I prefer using NDH, but pre-diabetes is fine as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just having a scope through here. There's lots of coding at risk. Let me see, what else have we got here? The point says somebody's diagnosed as having NDH. Should you wait a little bit for people to sort of identify and make some behavior changes, or do you trigger the referral right there and then?
Like, I generally, the next time I would speak to them, I'd normally arrange just a telephone follow-up and discuss the program, and then give the option to the person. And if they say, oh, I'd rather wait and do stuff myself, that's great. And then arrange a time to speak again. If many people are quite happy to be referred and receive support, particularly when you explain, it's individualized coaching to help them have improve their diet, increase physical activity, etc. And you give some of the data of the program, most people are quite keen to take part. But if they don't want to and they want to wait a bit longer, that's completely fine as well.
That's fine, that individualization, but it's not that easy. So any help, otherwise we'd all be as more active and following a better diet, wouldn't we, if it was as easy as just doing it and making changes. Okay, just looking through some of the other questions. There was a question around language. So are the programs only offered in English, or are there other languages to support
No,
people?
they're offered in a range of languages, and your provider in your area, so each area has its own provider. Your provider should be working with the system to decide face-to-face which languages are the most important ones according to the needs of your population. And they should be able to put on sessions in other languages, as long as the demographics require it and there's enough demand. There's also the possibility to do kind of group sessions, but online in other languages. And on the digital program, there is a wide range of languages that people can choose from. So yes, essentially lots of language choice.
Great. And if somebody in their area doesn't know who their local provider of these services, where would they look to find this information out?
So hopefully most people will know where their referral forms are, and the referral forms should be really clear about who your provider is, etc. If you've got any questions, like you can't find your referral form or you just want to know more about it, you should hopefully have someone, a contact at the ICB. If either it'll be an identified clinical lead or just someone you know is at the ICB. If you email someone at the ICB, I'm sure you will get put in touch with the right person.
Great. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And then sort of one more question. So there's sort of a 6-year cutoff point with you know, being able to be referred. Is there a reason, or can we sneak somebody in who's had diabetes for 7 or 8 years?
The reasoning is because of the likelihood of achieving remission. So you saw in some of our early data that actually we've got a significantly greater rates within 1 year of diagnosis, and it falls lower with longer durations. And indirect, they use the cutoff of 6 years for a similar reason. So at present, I think given the thinking is behind the trying to attain remission, that's where the line is drawn at 6 years. And at present, they won't accept anyone who doesn't meet the criteria. So it's quite fixed. But that's the reasoning behind it, because of the possibility. That doesn't mean that person won't get some benefit from weight loss, but remission seems less likely the longer the duration.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much. For more information, there is the email for you here, but it'll also be in the slide deck. So do please reach out if you need anything from us. Thank you very much for your attendance. I think the presentation was excellent. So thank you very much for going through all that detail. And we are very grateful that people spent their lunch session with us. I hope you go on to have a great rest of your day.